Now the next one I want to go to is not necessarily the number one system, but it's one that has the potential to deliver exceptional profit, and did definitely do that during the time that we tracked it during the competition. So during the competition, it produced about $19,000, which is this run here. You can see that it had a fairly strong drawdown initially, which wasn't great, but then it just took off, and its peak to valley is around about almost 2,000. So its average drawdown is around about 2 grand, which is not a small amount, or not average drawdown, but it's it would be around about the 1,500 mark. And then you've got a period here in around about May where it really hit its equity high, and then it just came off. It went sideways for a bit, and then it really came off strongly. So this is where, if you're not going to optimize your strategy, or you're not going to really worry about optimizing your currency strategy, you definitely need to have your R break. That would be a case where, and I think really at any point in time you really need to have your R break, and that at least stops you from getting this savage drawdown. But you also need to be clued into the fact that at some point this system's going to potentially turn back on and start running again, and this is where it happened. It happened around the 20th of June. And you wouldn't have obviously got in down here, but if you've allowed yourself a point at which you turn the system back on, so your bounce point, and it might be, say, might be $1,000, or even might even be $500, or whatever the amount is. You've at least been able, if you've got that, you've at least been able to capture a good bit of this move, which is fantastic, because you've got about $7,000 there of potential move that you don't want to miss out on. So and this comes back to the point I made. I made that point last week when we went through the strategies. When you're looking at a system and you're developing your pilot system, you get to your days, your week, your longs and your shorts, you still have to run your pilot system, because you really need to know when to turn your system on and off. And you need to know when, obviously, to get back in. Now, if you stop tracking your pilot system, even though, and this is why it's important to keep an eye on them, you're leaving a lot of money. And I think Stephen mentioned it last week in the session about making sure that you go down to that micro level, because you don't want to leave money. You don't want to leave money on the table. You want to take money out of the market and go through that process. But the same applies here. By just doing that little bit extra work and just visually eyeballing that system, then you've got the potential to take in some more money into your overall portfolio. So just a quick, it's worked in the past, it's going to come back again, and that's when it started to really kind of step up and perform. And if we have a look at the daily chart, I've actually marked where that system started to underperform. So with really a strong rise in volatility was where that was really starting to drop off. Now, the system has, during periods of rising volatility, has really struggled a little bit on the euro. So there are periods where this system did not do very well. Interestingly, though, the thing is that that here starting to run up again. So we've tapered out at the top. We're starting to see the market drop down, and you're actually starting to see a bit more of a performance that you want to see on the system. So keeping an eye on your volatility chart. Now, what is one of the things that we know as traders that the cycle trader is probably not going to do too well on? It's not going to do too well on increasing volatility, is it? It may be okay if. Now, the thing is here, if we perhaps, because remember that this system is running on a 5-brick Renko, so that doesn't give you much. That's about the lowest setting you want to have as far as your Renko and on the cycle. Now, you don't have to have too much of a jump in volatility for the 5-brick to start underperforming. So if you look at a 7, what's something we can do if we've got rising volatility? Obviously, we're looking at the trend trader there, But what can we do with the rise in volatility? How can we improve our overall performance if the 5-brick is not working too well? Anybody want to have a go at that? What can we physically do with our systems to potentially capture some profit or improve our profit potential? Okay, so definitely to use a bigger brick size, absolutely. All right, so yeah, definitely the brick size. So it definitely pays if you're running a chart, and I'm going to talk about multi-charts and TradeStation a little bit today as well. If you're back testing, so if you're doing back testing or managing your systems, then you're definitely going to want to have the 5, 7, and 10 brick set up with your. Try to get your optimal settings for those three, as well as running your daily chart. But you wouldn't want all of that information if you're running a VPS or a host server. You're not going to want all that information on your server, are you? You're only going to want the bare minimum, probably the current contract if it's futures. Only probably your standard configuration for the Renko brick. So if it's the 4 days of the previous month, your minimal data feeding into that, because you don't want to be sucking too many resources. But on your PC that you're testing, you definitely want to have your daily, your 5, 7, and 10, or whatever configuration you have, and you're running your optimal one, and then you've got those other two ones as back to check to see whether the volatility is having an impact on the overall performance. So we'll go back to that EURJPY. That was, as I said, that's not obviously system number one, because what's happened with this is that by us not turning this strategy off, we were, if you turn it off here, you're looking at around about $60 for your average trade net profit. Then this drawdown, which is fairly savage, that smashes your average trade net profit, because you've got almost 200 trades, 200 losing trades there. So it's really eroded your profitability. Whereas turning it off, you're out of the market, you're not getting your average trade net profit completely destroyed, and then you're able to come back in when it starts to move again. So that's something to consider as well. So if you do look at a strategy and say, oh look, the average trade net profit is terrible, just think about how your R multiple or your circuit breaker where you might turn the system off, and how that might improve your overall results. So I'll just close that down for a second. Now, so we've got the system 27, system 16. Now the next one is this